Hi everyone, I'm Julie, and I'll be teaching the 2025 Winter SAT Reading and Writing course here at Most. To start, we'll take a look at the course overview so that you'll have an understanding of what we'll be covering. Our time is split in half between reading and writing, so keep that in mind. I'll go over the reading schedule first. So as you can see here, I've split it up into each week, and we'll be covering all the lessons you'll need to know in order to master the different types of questions on the SAT reading section. We will typically go over 3 lessons a week and spend time solving questions together as a class so that you'll get a good grasp on how to approach these questions. So the questions on the SAT reading section include words in context, command of evidence, central ideas and details, inferences, text structure and purpose, and cross-text connections. So all of the lessons here will definitely be able to cover that, and you should be able to pick up some additional tips and tricks that I can show you throughout the course of our lessons or the mock test review. And so that should help you be able to improve on the SAT reading section. I'll also be assigning vocabulary and sentence completion questions as homework so that you'll be able to become more familiar with difficult SAT level words that you may potentially see on the test. Okay, let's move on to the writing course overview. So the writing schedule is going to function similarly, but we'll be covering 4 lessons throughout the course of a week. The majority of the writing lessons are going to cover grammar, so you should be able to identify specific parts of speech or grammatical concepts we cover when you solve these questions. A lot of students typically like to think about the nuance of how a sentence sounds right, but while some people might find this a good option, it's better to understand the technical aspects of each part of the sentence. So all of these questions you'll be able to identify the different parts of speech. And so all of the grammar questions include subject verb agreement, pronoun antecedents, verb forms, subject modifiers, plural and possessive nouns, clauses, supplements, and punctuation. So typically for students, I will have them be able to identify independent and dependent clauses the most because that is probably one of the most important parts of these grammar questions. Aside from grammar, we're going to take a look at how to solve transition and rhetorical synthesis questions. The rhetorical synthesis questions to include the use of like information from notes, and so those are the other 2 that we'll be covering with writing. Aside from that, students are going to be taking the mock test every day as part of your homework, and we're going to be spending time reviewing difficult questions in addition to the ones that students get wrong. So by the end of the course, you should be able to approach each of the questions methodically and be able to utilize certain quick tricks that you pick up, whether it be to shorten time or things like that. Some people may struggle with time. Some people may struggle with like the understanding the passages. So all of that we should be able to cover, and it should be a little bit more customized or personalized towards how you typically solve things. And hopefully by the end of the course, you'll be able to improve your score. All right, so that wraps up the course overview. So let's take an example. Let's take a look at an example for each of the sections. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to take a look at command of evidence for the reading section. But so for these questions, I would naturally, you do want to read the whole thing, but sometimes time is also a constraint. So if you find that time is not on your side, then I would look at the question first and just the question stem. It says like what is going to, which finding from Dr. Moretti and Bianchi's research would most directly support their claim. So from here, I would probably look for specifically the claim within the text. If we read the whole text, it says hazelnuts are praised for their healthy monosaturated fats and high vitamin E content. However, they also contain tannins, which can inhibit nutrient absorption, and phytic acid, an anti-nutrient that can impede the absorption of essential minerals. In a research article, Dr. Moretti and Dr. Bianchi from the University of Bologna in Italy proposed that roasting hazelnuts can decrease these compounds, improving their nutritional value. So we do want to look for the claim, right? A lot of these questions, they're going to usually have indicate exactly as this verb form. So either they'll say like the claim, the hypothesis, and so on and so forth. So sometimes you'll be able to just look for this exact word or perhaps a synonym within the text to lock down that claim. From here, though, we don't really see the word claim in this text, but we do see a synonym here, which is propose. So always think that either like a theory that they're hypothesizing, they claim, they suggest, right? All of these words are going to be indicative of that claim idea. So in our case, this is going to be the propose. And we want to make sure we fully understand this part of the text. So we know that this is probably the most important portion of the text here. Roasting hazelnuts can decrease these compounds, improving their nutritional value. So what I like to do is basically write this down in short form because sometimes your memory retention is not going to be the best. So I would write this down, maybe roasting hazelnuts is leads to decreasing the compounds. And that leads to improving the nutritional value. So this is the short form that I would personally write. When it says these compounds as well, because it says these, that means it was aforementioned in the previous sentence somewhere. So you want to double check what exactly these compounds are referring to, right? And so the compounds in this case, because we know that the lesser we have of these compounds, it leads to the improvement of the nutritional value. So I would look and find that, oh, okay, they have tannins. So the tannins are going to be what this compound is referring to. So just so that we're not confused and we have a good idea of what exactly it's referring to. So this is basically the short form of what our claim is going to be. Some students may choose to write out the whole thing or write it in ways that are a little bit more less more clear. So let's go ahead and we want to make sure that usually these ones are either going to be supporting or weakening. And so make sure that whatever the idea is for this question is definitely going to support this idea, right? So roasting hazelnuts, ultimately decreasing the tannin, leads to better nutrition. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the answer choices. Roasted hazelnuts displayed significant lower levels of tannins and phytic acid compared to raw hazelnuts, enhancing their nutritional value and digestibility. Okay, so first they have the mention of the roasted hazelnuts, and it's making a comparison to raw hazelnuts, right? So we can definitely see that comparison would give us a little bit clear context as to whether or not there's a difference in that nutritional value. Now, it also says there's lower levels of tannin. So by saying lower levels of tannin, that is going to complete this part here. So that I can definitely see. And then it's going to enhance their nutritional value, which is going to be this part here, right? So ultimately, I do feel like this is potentially a good answer, right? Because it is going to indicate all three aspects of what we wanted in our proposal or our claim. But we want to make sure that the other answer choices are wrong, so let's go ahead and double check. Roasting hazelnuts increase their overall vitamin E content and the bioavailability of monounsaturated fats, but did not have a significant effect on tannin and phytic acid levels. So now they're mentioning a different part of the text here, which is the overall vitamin E content, which they did mention here and it was praised for it. But ultimately, that wasn't really part of the claim. So don't get distracted by maybe some portions of the text that are not going to be as important as it is when it's connected to the claim. So I would eliminate this because this is going to be irrelevant. But also, if you weren't able to catch that, this second half here, not having a significant effect on tannin, this is also untrue, right? Because clearly it says it's leading to the decrease of tannin, but if it has no a significant effect, that means there is no effect and it's not decreasing. So that means this is also going to be wrong. Okay. So, and then if we look at C, Both roasted and raw hazelnuts show a decrease in tannin and phytic acid content when soaked in a saline solution, but roasted hazelnuts retained a higher amount of nutrient. Okay, so this is not bad, right? Because this one also mentions the decrease in tannin, and it says that they're going to have more nutrients. But ultimately, they say that it's both roasted and raw. And here they don't really mention anything about raw. So like you're bringing in a component that is not mentioned in the text. So perhaps if A wasn't there as an answer choice, maybe C could have been a good one. But ultimately, because there is no mention of roasted and A is ultimately the better answer choice, this would be wrong because we don't really want to make an assumption that is beyond the scope of the text. Right, and then if we look at D, the research discovered that hazelnuts contain two compounds, proanthocyanidins and beta sitosterol, which can improve digestion and reduce the risk of gastrointestinal discomfort after consumption. Now, here they're bringing in more components, right? It says here that they're reducing the risk of discomfort. So that means also think about if it's two negatives. Then that can turn into a positive. In this case, it's saying, okay, we can improve digestion. So this is a positive thing, right? And reducing the risk of discomfort, this is also a positive thing. Okay, so then here, okay, so we have both positives, so ultimately that's still a positive. If you had, for example, if you had two negatives, if it says, then it's kind of like multiplication, right? Like negative times negative is positive. So keep that in mind if that confuses you, if you have a double negative. But in any case, so here it says that they contain two compounds. But ultimately, the compound that they were focused on really was going to be about tannins, right? They're not mentioning these other two compounds. So you're, again, same thing as C, you're bringing in a component that is irrelevant. So because it's outside the scope of the text, this again is going to be wrong. So our best answer is going to be A. It was the most direct. It hit all the components, all the three aspects that we wanted in our claim, and there was no additional information outside the scope of the text. So that's where we could see A is going to be our best answer. Okay, now let's move on to a writing question. So for this one, I'll take a look at a transition question. Okay, so for these ones, typically the transition words are broken down into three different categories. There's going to be continuation, cause and effect, and contrast. And usually if you're running short on time, you don't necessarily need to read the whole text, but you want to focus more so on the sentence that has the blank. So that's going to be this sentence here. And then you also want to focus on the sentence before. So that, for the most case, that should be able to help you just figure out what kind of transition word it is. Is it continuation? Is it cause and effect? Is it contrast? So it's usually going to be falling under one of those three. But sometimes you're not able to really tell. That's when you want to go ahead and read more of the text for clarification. So if we read these sentences, today they wear wetsuits for protection from the cold and swimming fins for increased speed in water. Okay. And then the next sentence says, they do not blank use oxygen tanks. Okay, so here they're looking at the idea of, okay, we know that they're wearing wetsuits for protection, and then they do not use oxygen tanks. So to me, this seems pretty straightforward because it looks like that they're going to be contrasting, right? They're wearing one thing, but they do not use another thing. So that in this case is going to be obviously a contrast. So given that it is a contrast, right, I would go ahead and see, right, if any of these ones are or are not contrast. So there's only one contrast word here. So our best answer has to be C, right? These ones, for example, and moreover, likewise, all of these three types are going to fall under the category of continue. Of course, within continuation, there are like several branches. So, for example, would be a detail, right? Or likewise is going to be a comparison, and moreover is additional information. So in that case, once if you were to determine that it's actually a continuation type of question, then you would want to see, okay, then is it going to be a detail or is it for emphasis or comparison or additional information? Then you would want to break it down into those different categories and then work from there. But for this one, we didn't need to do that. We were able to just pinpoint that, however, is a very obvious contrast word. So we were basically just able to choose C. So that's how we would solve this. Sometimes, if we're unsure of maybe what kind of connection these two sentences have, then what I would do is go to the answer choices. If there are, aside from continuation, within cause and effect and contrast, they pretty much are broadly about the same in terms of the meaning behind it. So there is no real broken, like branching out into the different types here. So if let's say there was however and but as two different answer choices, then you can eliminate both of those because they mean the exact same thing. Then you're able to at least eliminate two answer choices before thinking about, okay, is it going to be a continuation or a cause and effect? So that's another way you can approach it as a more simple manner. Okay, and so that's going to be it for our introduction to the class today. Um, and I look forward to seeing you guys over the winter course.